These men are my bodyguards, their lives forfeit to the guarantee of my physical safety. Of their loyalty to me there shall be no question nor doubt. I, and I alone, shall have the authority to stand in judgment over them. No other commander shall they have in battle nor in service. None shall bar them from me, and none shall hamper or stall their mission. So it is decreed.
The Adeptus Custodes, known as the Legio Custodes during the era of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, and colloquially as the 10,000, is the Imperial Adepta responsible for protecting the Imperial Palace and the physical body of the Emperor of Mankind, as well as serving as his most important emissaries, his companions, and the keepers of his many secrets. The Custodes is an elite cadre of genetically engineered transhuman warriors who are even more potent in combat than the Adeptus Astartes. They are to the Space Marines as the Emperor is to his Primarchs, and it is rumored that each was created by the Master of Mankind personally. His might permeates them, burns in their eyes and flows through their veins as surely as their blood. As such, the Adeptus Custodes are widely regarded as the deadliest warriors in the galaxy, human or otherwise. Where Space Marines represent the mass-produced, genetically engineered soldiers of the Imperium of Man, the Adeptus Custodes are a force of individual warriors, each a bastion in his own right and a sentinel of unmatched capability and singular purpose created to counter any possible threat, human, alien, or demonic. These warriors have stood in the presence of the immortal Emperor of Mankind since before the time of the Unification Wars. For 10,000 Terran years and more, the Custodians have stood watch over their lord and master, serving as the Emperor's personal heralds and Praetorian bodyguard. During the Great Crusade, these resplendent warriors guarded the Emperor wherever he went and swore to give their lives to protect his. After his incarceration in the Golden Throne following the Horus Heresy 10 standard millennia ago, they have taken a far more limited role in the Imperium of Man. They almost never leave Terra and only very rarely are seen outside the Imperial Palace as they watch over their recumbent master and patrol the precincts of the Emperor's palace, ever vigilant of threats. It is only the Adeptus Custodes who decide who may enter the Sanctum Imperialis of the Emperor at the heart of the inner palace, and when they may do so. With the birth of the Great Rift in the era Indomitus and the resurrection of the Primarch Robert Guilliman as the Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent, the Adeptus Custodes have been forced to take a more active role in galactic affairs. A force of custodians has followed Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade out into the galaxy, often serving as the heralds of a torchbearer's fleet, bringing the Primaris creation technology to existing Space Marine chapters. This was done both to reassure the existing chapters of the Adeptus Astartes that the gift of the Primaris Space Marines was ordained by the will of the Emperor, but also because in this new era of constant threat, the Custodes have come to a hard realization. Sometimes the best defense is found on offense. The Adeptus Custodes. It is a name spoken in reverent whispers, for these warriors have stood in the presence of the immortal Emperor of Mankind and are charged with his protection. His greatness runs in their veins, undiluted by the passage of aeons. They have been called the Emperor's right hand, for they act with his authority and fight in his name. Only now, as the threat of chaos grows ever greater and takes its dreaded toll, does that gilded hand reach out and become an eagle's claw. The Custodian Guard are the talons of the Emperor unsheathed, and they will tear the corruption of chaos from the Imperium no matter the cost. Near immortal are the Adeptus Custodes, for the golden elixir of the Emperor's own blood runs in their veins. Though outwardly resplendent, there is a scar upon the soul of the Custodian Guard, an inescapable disgrace that has tainted their history and lives in the heart of every warrior, from fresh inductees to veterans over 1,000 Terran years old. Clad in Baroque golden custodian armor and armed with priceless relic weaponry, the Adeptus Custodes make for a magnificent sight. They tower over mortals. Each has the statuesque physique of an ancient hero, close to 9 Terran feet in height even without his scarlet-crested helm. Yet for all their might, for all their bravery, the Custodians were unable to prevent the Emperor from falling to his traitorous son, the Primarch Horus. For millennia, The Adeptus Custodes have formed the unyielding core of the Emperor's multi-layered defenses. Those custodian guard charged with the physical protection of the Master of Mankind spend every waking second devoted to their task, refining their warrior skills and constantly testing and updating their own strategies to ensure the sanctity of the Emperor's throne. They are his last line of defense against a hostile galaxy hell-bent on humanity's destruction. If they fail in their task, the Imperium of Man will collapse from the inside out. Their duty is so sacred, their reputation so profound, that even Space Marines and Inquisitors kneel before them. Though few truly realize it, humanity teeters upon the precipice. Aliens and fiends hurl themselves against the Imperium's borders even as the rot of treachery and the mutating curse of chaos gnaw at it from within. Under such impossible duress, mankind cannot endure. Once, the most part of the Adeptus Custodes would have stood stoically by as the Emperor's foes advanced upon Terra, each lordly champion stern and immobile until the foe crossed the pitch-black moat of the Sol system and hammered upon the palace walls themselves. After all, to keep vigil is the oath they swore to fulfill, and they have never abandoned it, even as thousands of worlds have burned. Now that sovereign duty has changed. In mankind's darkest hour, a legend has emerged from the annals of history. The Ultramarines' Primarch Robert Guilliman, an icon of authority. The coming of this legendary High Lord has galvanized the Adeptus Custodes and, after long consultation, seen them reorganized and given new life. The Golden Brotherhood now numbers not only Guardians but also Crusaders. Alongside the Anti-Seekers known as the Sisters of Silence, the Adeptus Custodes bring war anew to the enemies of the Imperium. All shall learn to fear their golden warships, for they herald swift and unmerciful slaughter. These are heroes of fire and blade, and they will not stop until every threat to their immortal master lies slain. It is not an uncommon belief to suppose the Custodian Guard were themselves some variant of the Estats, if so crude a term might be applied, an advanced form, perhaps even a second, improved iteration. While this explanation might seem to fit the facts, particularly to those without intimate knowledge of the Imperium's birth pains during the final acts of the Unification Wars on Old Earth, it could not be further from the truth. The bloody chronicles of the Unification Wars, particularly in their earliest stages when the Emperor first rose from the nightmarish bloodshed of Old Earth's long night in the late 29th millennium to cast down the reign of the warlords and monsters that had carved mankind's birthworld into 1,000 slaughter-haunted pieces, are difficult now to comprehend. Many are rightly sealed from the Imperium scholars, and even the Terran court, the dangerous truths within suppressed. But in those dark chronicles the Custodian Guard, in some form or shape, have their part as far back as any can record or those few souls who survive yet from those times can remember. Upon the pillars of the Black Manse of Nassau, capital of one of the earliest of the techno-barbarian holds to submit before he who was to later be known as the Emperor, inscriptions record the Lord of Lightning coming before their warlord kind flanked by his 4 giants of crimson and gold, demanding surrender. Solar decades later, according to detailed extant records preserved in the Trans-Nordic Akashic Archives, a companion guard of 30 custodians, bearing guardian spears, clad in augment armor, and personally commanded by the Emperor, fought at the head of the newborn Thunder Legion in the assault against the formidable Molan Sen Confederacy. One of their number is even recorded as being responsible for striking the head of the Confederation's tyrant prophet from its shoulders in the aftermath of the campaign's climactic Battle of the Red Frost. Still decades later, it would be the Custodian Guard in their hundreds, in a form akin to their most modern aspect, who would be charged with leading the cull of those same Thunder Warriors who had once served the Emperor, and who had then rebelled against him in the wake of their forcible disbandment and internment as their mental instability, metabolic collapse, and anger over their shortened lifespans led to violence. Only this time the Custodian Guard would be accompanied by the new gene-crafted warriors meant to replace the Thunder Warriors, the first few thousand prototype Space Marines, most of whom would go on to form the nascent Ist Legion, later known as the Dark Angels. The evidence then is clear, since before the first worlds were conquered as the Great Crusade left the Sol system, since before the taking of Luna and the Treaty of Olympus Mons, since before the Cataclysm of Ursh and the fall of the Indonesic bloc, before the Space Marines and before the Thunder Warriors, the Custodian Guard have walked at the Emperor's side. The origins of the Custodian Guard are shrouded in myth and legend. The ancient Legio Custodes were the bodyguards and sworn protectors of the Emperor and his chosen emissaries, and when the need arose, his most deadly executioners, genetically engineered warriors of unswerving loyalty and unshakable purpose. Their might and skill at arms was greater even than the Space Marines of the ancient Legions Astartes, while their weapons and wargear were uniquely potent, representing the apex of the Imperium's technology. Their history is a long one, and for centuries they have walked in the Emperor's shadow as his praetorians and the protector of his secrets. The Legio Custodes are by many accounts the Emperor's true firstborn, prefiguring even the gene-crafted Thunder Warriors of the Unification Wars. They are his first genetically engineered, psycho-indoctrinated warriors, perfected weapons crafted by the Emperor's genius from the dread lore of the Dark Age of technology. They are in almost every measurable way superhuman, stronger, faster, more acute of senses, and more resilient than even the doomed Thunder Warriors or the Space Marines who would follow them, and so far beyond the limits of an unaugmented human as to be almost godlike in comparison. Indeed, only the Primarchs and above them, the Emperor himself exceeds them in corporeal might, and to meet them in open conflict is to court death for human or alien alike. They are rare creatures, these firstborn of the Emperor's genecraft. Such was their psychophysical design and the intricacy and sophistication of the genecraft involved, that the modifications which went into their creation required such strict biological and psychological criteria that only a mere one in many thousands of potential candidates might prove suitable for the simplest of the steps involved in the Legio Custodes creation process. Even of this small pool of candidates, survival through the multiple solar decades of alchemical augmentation and psychomimetic training were far from guaranteed. In this fact can be seen a pattern also replicated in the Space Marine legions, only to a far greater degree. While the numbers of the Legions Astartes were prevented from growing beyond perhaps 1 million at their greatest strength by the limitations inherent in the means of their creation, a paltry sum compared to the billions of others who took part in the Great Crusade, the Legio Custodes could never have operated on the scale of the Space Marine legions, even if the attempt had been made. As a result of the inherent difficulty of their creation, the number of active Legio Custodes warriors never, it is believed, exceeded 10,000. This figure was first attained towards the middle stages of the Great Crusade and maintained diligently enough that the 10,000 itself became a cognomen for the Custodian Guard in the works of the Remembrances and the notaries of the Imperial Court since, whatever its literal accuracy, certainly no more than 1,000 have ever been seen together at any one time, and then only once at the famous Battle of Gyros Thravian, fought during the Great Crusade against the Orc warlord Garkal Blackfang and his vast greenskin horde. The Primarchs Horus, Rogel Dawn, and Mortarion, and their legions were vastly outnumbered and close to defeat when the Emperor led an assault from his golden battle badge, the Bustalis. At the head of 1,000 custodians, the Emperor struck at the very heart of the Orc horde, confronting Garkal atop a towering gargant. As the Emperor decapitated the giant, black-skinned Orc, the custodians laid waste to the warlord's prime warriors. It is said that within moments over 100,000 greenskins died, and the Wa'Agiate was broken. Legend has it that only 3 custodians fell at the battle, their names enshrined forever and engraved on the Emperor's armor thereafter. To accomplish the ends to which the Legio Custodes were designed, not only is a custodian's superhuman physical power honed to a razor's edge, but so also is the individual custodian's intellect, mental fortitude, and martial skill developed with ruthless application and zeal. The result is the creation not simply of a preternaturally deadly fighter or master assassin, though they can readily serve as both, but to create a being whose perception and apprehension of threat and how to counter it is literally beyond the natural limits of humanity or the powers of a machine. by means unknown and unknowable beyond the Emperor's own forbidden laboratories, are the minds of the custodians programmed and fortified, filled with an encyclopedic knowledge of all the arts of death, deceit, and destruction they might encounter in their duty, and how both to counter and employ them. Beyond even this, their education is prodigious, for they are not simply the Emperor's protectors in intention. They are also made to be his companions, and with him they are armed to converse on such matters of warfare, politics, and philosophy as he wished. Most importantly, their psyches are also crafted and shaped as a master gemsmith might cut and polish a perfect stone, fashioned to precise order and pattern, a pattern to which loyalty and discipline, duty and unflinching obedience to the Emperor goes deeper than blood and bone, deeper than conscious thought or unconscious desire. If at any stage in the process of custodian augmentation the merest flaw is encountered, as with the gemsmith's search for the perfect stone, the flawed subject is discarded. The product of these amassed arts, arcane, academic, and militant, is a body of warriors who are living weapons. These made up the Legio Custodes, and later the Adeptus Custodes itself, the 10,000. As an organization, it was in many ways both alike and unalike to the ancient Space Marine legions in formation and structure, a paramilitary force unique in human history, inviolate in action and answerable only to the Emperor. While each legion was, at least at conception, a highly stratified and self-contained military organization designed to be the shock troops and principal military agency of the Great Crusade, the Legio Custodes was similarly self-sufficient and self-contained, but was never armed or expected to prosecute a full war, but instead to utterly dominate whichever particular close battle in which they fought. Their base of operations is Terra itself, and their own domains interwoven with that of the Emperor. They hold few void ships of their own, but could command by edict any such vessel of the Imperialis Armada or later Imperial Navy to their task, and in fact requisition anyone or anything within the Imperium in extremis to serve their most sacred and undaunted task: the protection of the Emperor and his works from all the foes of humanity. Whether serving as part of a detachment acting as the destroyers of some ill-fated foe, or tasked as a bodyguard for the Emperor or some element of his household, or even where a handful of custodians might be deployed to act as the personal protectors of an imperial emissary or lord militant, they are tireless, vigilant, and remorseless. They are armed, created, and trained to be the match and the death of anything they might encounter face to face, be that human, xenos, or machine, in any circumstance of single combat, counterattack to ambush or close-range assault. Again and again has history seen the Custodian Guard stand off and defeat odds that seem beyond reason or belief. It has seen them slay monsters foul enough to have been dredged up from pure nightmare, and defeat and slay assassins born of arts both dark and subtle beyond human ken. Tested again and again, be it on alien worlds untrodden by humanity, or within the tangled underhives of the domains of mankind lost to the age of strife, or the twisted palaces of alien warlords, the custodians proved themselves warriors of terrifying ability. Their service and their mystery saw the Legio Custodes and the later Adeptus Custodes quickly become a legend equal in wonder and terror even to those alongside whom they served, and in the echoes of whispered stories in every corner of the burgeoning Imperium. To the common soldier and planetary governor alike, the golden armored image of the Custodian Guard was a visible sign not only of the Emperor's direct protection and the embodiment of his will and agency, but also the omen of his unstoppable wrath, as personal and as terrifying in their way as the Angels of Death. His Space Marines were impersonal and all-conquering avatars in the minds of many of the Great Crusade itself. After the breaking of the Orcs upon Olenar, the Emperor returned to Terra, taking his Custodian Guard with him. The seeds of doubt he left behind among the Space Marine legions soon became the roots of treachery, for there is darkness in every soul, and the ruinous powers have always known how to exploit it. Before a single generation had passed, the insidious taint of chaos had infected a full half of the Emperor's Primarchs, Horus foremost amongst them. These arch-traitors spread the moral decay to the legions Astartes they led, and the galaxy was lit with the fires of strife and civil war. At the climax of the Horus Heresy, the Custodian Guard fought monstrosities without number, for those in the traitor legions powerful enough to reach the gates of the Imperial Palace were twisted body and soul by the baleful gifts of chaos. 1,000 victories were won by the Custodian Guard, but they all turned to ash when the Master of Mankind teleported aboard Horus' flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, at the height of the Siege of Terra. There, a strike force of Legio Custodes fought the fiercest of traitors to protect their master. They were found wanting. Though Horus was defeated by the Emperor in single combat at the last, it was at an unimaginable cost. The War Master cast down the angelic Primarch Sanguinius and dealt the Emperor a mortal blow before being slain in turn. Though the Emperor's psyche remained active within his shattered body since that day, the Custodian Guard have stood vigil over little more than a broken corpse, wizened and immobile upon a slowly failing life support system. Time of rebirth. The Custodians have long worn the shroud of shame after that fateful day. In grave ceremony, they donned black cloaks to symbolize the pall of darkness that had fallen over their order. The Emperor's realm, racked by the tempest of heresy, was reforged by those Primarchs that survived the great upheaval. Largely through the efforts of the Ultramarines Primarch Robert Guilliman as the first Lord Commander of the Imperium, the Byzantine organizations of the Imperium were reordered during the period remembered as the time of rebirth in such a way as to ensure that no one faction or power could again threaten Terra or the rule of the Emperor. In doing so, these organizations also relinquished some of their military strength. The Legions Astartes were divided into far smaller chapters of 1,000 Space Marines each during the second founding. The Legio Custodes, though it kept its numerical strength of 10 times that number, was reforged as the Adeptus Custodes before the time of the second founding, becoming Castellans of the Imperial Palace, whose sole and solemn duty was to protect the Emperor from final death. Even in the days before the Horus Heresy, it was a rare and blessed thing to see a member of the Legio Custodes, and due to the confinement of the Emperor to the Golden Throne, it has become an almost unthinkable event for a present-day citizen of the Imperium. Even during the Siege of Terra, only a handful of Custodes joined the Emperor when he made his assault upon Horus' flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. Since the death of Horus and the mortal wounds he inflicted upon the Emperor, the Legio Custodes, renamed the Adeptus Custodes after the time of rebirth, and the reorganization of the Imperium, conducted by Guilliman in the early 31st millennium, has taken a more limited role by acting solely as the protectors of the physical form of the Emperor on Terra and the primary providers of security for the Imperial Palace. The Adeptus Custodes are the Auric Mortalis, the Golden Death, the dread guardians and only living beings permitted to be in the presence of the Emperor unencumbered. Now ensconced deep within the Sanctum Imperialis of the inner palace on Terra, they continue their eternal watch over the recumbent form of the Emperor upon the Golden Throne. Despite their long vigil, the Adeptus Custodes have continued to play an important role during some of the most tumultuous times in Imperial history. The Custodians were instrumental in ending the rule of the High Lord Goj Vandai during the Age of Apostasy in the 36th millennium. It was the actions of a few members of the Adeptus Custodes, utilizing secret passages within the Imperial Palace known only to themselves, that brought the Sisters of Battle, then known as the Brides of the Emperor, to fully realize the acts of base treason perpetrated by Vandai. After their leader, Alicia Dominica, was brought before the Emperor himself by the Custodes through the secret passages of the palace, she returned and executed Vandai personally for his apostasy and betrayal of the Master of Mankind. No one knows for sure how many hidden coups, secret rebellions, and misguided attempts at assassination the Adeptus Custodes have foiled. That their martial skills remain so sharp after 10,000 standard years, however, is evidence that they have not stood an idle vigil. They have been called the Emperor's right hand, for they act with his authority and fight in his name. Only now, as the threat of chaos grows ever greater and takes its dreaded toll, does that gilded hand reach out and become an eagle's claw. The Custodian Guard are the talons of the Emperor unsheathed, and they will tear the corruption of chaos from the Imperium no matter the cost. In the 41st millennium, the personal sanction of Robert Guilliman, the resurrected Primarch of the Ultramarines sent shockwaves through the Adeptus Custodes. After 10,000 Terran years of mourning, the Custodian Guard have cast off their black cloaks and taken to the Sea of Stars once more. The fires of battle will absolve them, a baptism of blood that washes away the stain of their one great failure. Now they crusade once more against the dying of the Emperor's light, a vengeance long awaited finally within reach of their blades. The hour of action is nigh as the era Indomitus dawns. With the surge of chaos activity across the galaxy in the wake of the Great Rift's birth and the threat of eternal damnation more real than ever, the Adeptus Custodes have taken their vow of protection to its logical extreme. They will see the destruction of those forces who pose a threat to the sanctity of Terra. First amongst these are the dread hordes of chaos. The best form of defense is attack. It is a maxim that has survived through the millennia, and with good reason. Of late, it has become the mantra of all Adeptus Custodes commanders. In conjunction with the alpha-level astropaths and doomscryers that dwell within the Imperial Palace, these officers launch terrifyingly effective strikes at those whom they deem a threat to the Emperor's works. More than one galactic tyrant, laying plans for a crusade that he envisages culminating on Terra itself, has found the warriors of the Emperor descending from the heavens to strike him down before he has even taken to his ships. There are those who believe that the Adeptus Custodes stand immobilized by ritual and rote, but they are sorely mistaken. Only the Custodian Guard know what occurs behind the Sanctum Imperialis colossal doors, and the lengths to which they have gone to keep their vigil. Their sacred task has by no means led to inactivity. Hundreds of wars have been fought by the Adeptus Custodes over the aeons, some in Terra's defense, some in secret, and some further afield. Even when the din of war recedes, these warriors work to test and refine the protective aegis they hold before their master, sending agents into the Sol system to divine likely routes of infiltration and assassination so they can stay ahead of even the most inventive enemies. The Adeptus Custodes have long-honed strategies and tactics in case they should be called upon to join the frontline fight for humanity's survival. The day of that remit has finally arrived. The resurrected Primarch Guilliman, restored to his ancient role as the Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent, has met alone with his father, the Master of Mankind, and emerged with a clear vision of humanity united in battle. Those Custodian Guard known as the Companions, the 300 warriors charged with the direct defense of the Emperor on the Golden Throne, remain by his side, just as the colossal edifice of his palace continues to be bolstered by a standing army of golden heroes. The rest have taken to the stars. They have done so in no small force, for this majestic legion still numbers 10,000 blades and more. With the Sanctum Imperialis secure under the vigil of the Companions, the Crusaders are free to pursue the war of aggression they have long desired, putting into place war strategies perfected over the centuries through fractal thought exercises, cogitator-spawned algorithms, long study, and even simulated conflicts waged in hallucinariums. These give the Custodians a tactical edge that allows them to counter the enemy's actions before they have begun. In the last days before the gathering storm broke and the great rift tore the void in two, a bright light of hope was kindled within the galactic empire of Ultramar. Through great sacrifice and unnatural artifice, Robert Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, was restored from the brink of death. His coming would herald great changes for the Imperium. When the traitor legions fell upon the Imperial Palace at the culmination of the Horus Heresy, Robert Guilliman and his Ultramarines were too far away to fight in their father's defense. Perhaps, had it been otherwise, the fate of the galaxy would have been very different. Whatever the case, following his revival, Guilliman was determined that he would not make the same mistake twice. Seeing the darkness rising to swamp the Imperium, he launched a desperate crusade across the stars that brought him by strange and bloody roads to the throne world itself. Guilliman was welcomed with all honor on Terra, permitted audience with the Emperor by Aquila Commander Callum Varanor, and reinstated as Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent by an assemblage of the High Lords of Terra. Though the returned Primarch remained outwardly stern and regal, he had been shaken to the core by what had become of his father's empire. He quickly began instating changes that would permit the Imperium to fight back against the onrushing hordes of chaos, bulldozing the bureaucratic stubbornness and hidebound pedantry of the Adeptus Terra as he went. Guilliman's return came not a moment too soon, for he had not been long at his labors when the cascading fury of the Great Rift washed over the Sol system. Though not directly struck by warp storms, Terra bore the brunt of empiric shockwaves that temporarily extinguished the light of the Astronomicon during what became known as the Noctis Aeterna and wrought havoc and misery from the planet's highest spires to its deepest crypts. The Adeptus Custodes found themselves putting down riots, doomsday cult uprisings, and rampaging packs of luckless petitioners driven to madness and cannibalism. Bands of custodian wardens stood their ground in the shadowed undervaults far beneath the Imperial Palace as runic sigils burned out and timeless horrors burst from their containment cells. Worse was to follow. Seeking to strike the decapitating blow that would bring the Imperium to ruin, a vast horde of cornate daemons tore through the skin of reality and assaulted the Lion's Gate of the palace, initiating what became known informally as the Second Battle of Terra. Legions of howling daemons surged towards the Emperor's palace in a crimson tidal wave, and a frenzied battle ensued. The battleship-sized gun emplacements flanking the Lion's Gate blasted glowing craters in the diabolical horde, but alone they had no hope of prevailing. Led by Robert Guilliman and Captain General Trajan Valorous, a combined host of the Adeptus Custodes, Ultramarines, and Sisters of Silence marched out to meet the daemons before the walls of the Imperial Palace. In scenes that echoed the horror of the Siege of Terra 10 millennia before, the golden warriors of the Adeptus Custodes faced the blood god's savage butchers blade to blade. This time, led by some of the Imperium's greatest champions and driven by a furious determination never to fail again, they prevailed. One by one, the 8 bloodthirsters that led the attack were blown apart or cut down. The cost in lives was great, with noble defenders who had stood guard over the Emperor for thousands of Terran years brought low by the brazen weapons of Khorne's hateful daemons. Yet even as the skies boiled blood-red and carmine rains slicked the ground, the blood legions of Khorne faded from reality with howls of frustration and rage. The Battle of Lion's Gate proved a stark truth. While great swaths of witnesses to the daemonic incursion were corralled and executed by the Inquisition, and efforts made to obliterate all evidence of the conflict, the masters of the Adeptus Custodes formally recognized that Terra's defense could no longer be guaranteed without greater proactive measures. The servants of the Dark Gods had bypassed the defenses of the cradle of humanity. Behind locked doors, complex wards, and layers of seat protections, Trajan Valorous and Guilliman ratified a formal amendment to the role of the Adeptus Custodes. The Imperial Palace must still be guarded, of course, and the Companion's watch must continue within the Emperor's throne room. However, as a logical extension of the vows of duty they had sworn, the Adeptus Custodes committed to greatly extending their extrasolar activities. Aided by oracular doomscryers and alpha-level astropathic intercepts, and guided in part by the continued efforts of the Eyes of the Emperor, more custode shield hosts than ever before struck out from Terra. The aim of these forces was to exterminate utterly the most deadly threats to the Emperor himself. This mission might take them all across the galaxy, even into the shadows of the Imperium Nihalis beyond the sprawl of the Great Rift to the galactic north, but always their focus would be the sanctity of Terra. In this capacity, a number of shield companies attached themselves to Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade, reprising the role of the Emperor's emissaries in bearing Primaris Space Marines reinforcements and the Primaris creation technology to the beleaguered Space Marine chapters, and ensuring they understood that this was a gift from the Master of Mankind himself. It was not to be squandered or refused. Other shield companies relocated to permanently garrison the Sol system's outer defenses, or traveled further afield in order to watch over the primary warp routes that remained stable paths to the throne world. Others still took even more esoteric mantles, becoming hunters after arch-heretics, questers for artifacts crucial to the ongoing survival of the Imperium, or redoubling their efforts in their wars against humanity's hidden foes. Not since the Great Crusade had so many custodians bestrode the stars. The Adeptus Custodes, for long millennia the bodyguard of the Emperor, were charged with the unthinkable, to leave his side and strike against those who would see the master of mankind dead. Just as a spring tightly wound uncoils with all the more force, the Adeptus Custodes have taken war to the enemies of the Imperium with extreme alacrity and vigor in the era Indomitus. It is tradition that when one of their number falls, terror mourns, and the giant bell of lost souls is rung in memoriam. With a new era of war upon them, that sonorous toll has been heard more frequently than ever. They do not fall easily, however, for they have access to the finest weaponry, and the museum arsenals of the Imperial Palace are theirs to use as they see fit. Few post-Horus Heresy variations of tank, aircraft or weapon systems are at their disposal, but they are perhaps stronger for it. Every weapon the Custodian Guard uses to wage war has earned its place 100 times over. Their armored support elements were perfected when the Imperium was still in its infancy, and they remain just as potent, their machine spirits more bellicose and powerful than any latter-day equivalent. The Adeptus Custodes employs squadrons of gold-hulled gunships. Some of these are the very same craft used during the Horus Heresy, painstakingly maintained and blessed each day with sacred oils and unguents. When a direct vector of invasion is called for, the Adeptus Custodes utilize Godstrike Pavan teleportarium arrays, appearing in the midst of the fray in storms of golden light. Their starships have ancient translocation bays where blessed incense drifts in the chill air, each station permanently attended to by high-ranking tech priests and blessed to such a degree that even contempted dreadnoughts can be teleported straight into battle. The warriors inside, their armor-proof against the wrenching forces of this arcane technology, shake off their disorientation in a heartbeat before launching thunderous assaults their foes could not have seen coming. The willpower and fortitude of the Adeptus Custodes is such that even the most fiendish sorcerers find their mental assaults rebounding from a wall of sheer conviction. The Custodians share the blood of the Emperor, after all, and their loyalty to their primogenitor is unshakable. If the Adeptus Custodes could be said to have a weakness, it is that they fight as individuals rather than squads of soldiers, as proud lions rather than cunning wolves. Each wears armor crafted to his particular physique, fights in whatever style he deems most effective, and is given free rein to attack or defend as he sees fit. This makes him a terrifyingly effective combatant. A single Custodian can break a charging horde by himself, though he may take a few good hits in the process. To outsiders, their supreme self-confidence may seem like arrogance. They pay little heed to mortal men, and even the Adeptus Astartes are kept at spear's length for their former transgressions against the Emperor. Yet the reason is a noble one. Every act, thought, and deed of a Custodian is made for the furtherance of the Emperor's cause, and therefore the survival of the human race. Those who stand in the way of such paragons of surety do not last long. As befits such a body of elite warriors, the internal hierarchy of the Adeptus Custodes is remarkably flat. The overall command of the Adeptus Custodes, of course, lies within the purview of the Emperor directly, but serving as the head of the order is a single officer, the Captain General, and due to the importance of the Adeptus Custodes in the governing of the Imperium, since they always stand the closest to the Emperor, the Captain General often holds a position amongst the ruling High Lords of Terror on the Senatorum Imperialis. The Captain General commands the 10,000, inheriting a post that has been passed down from one gallant leader to the next ever since the mysterious disappearance of Constantin Valdor. The Captain General has absolute authority over the Custodes, acting as the ritual proxy for the Emperor himself and speaking with the voice of the Master of Mankind. Immediately below the absolute authority of the Captain General were the two tribunes, the senior members of the Custodian Tribunate, a senior cadre of 10 veteran custodians forming the Adeptus Custodes Council of War and Policy, who acted as advisors to the Captain General. This body has the incomparable privilege of providing their services as counsel to the Emperor himself, should he so desire it, and in the matters of the security of the Imperial Palace's inner sanctums and the person of the Emperor, no higher authority exists. Membership of this body changes periodically to ensure a blend of established wisdom and fresh ideas. A custodian must have earned at least 10 names before he can serve on the tribunate and have led his comrades victoriously in battle on at least 3 occasions. Once he joins the tribunate, a custodian must serve for at least 10 Terran years. During this time, he will not see the front lines, for he is too busy bending all of his considerable intellect to supporting, strategically and diplomatically, the Captain General. Below this ruling council can be found the Custodian Prefectorate and the Shield Captains. The distinction between the two, not apparent entirely to outsiders, is one perhaps of seniority and function, with the title of Prefect accorded as a reward of veterancy and favor in service by the Emperor, while the rank of Shield Captain indicates an active field command over a particular detachment or deployment of the Custodes. These two ranks fulfill the roles of inspiring leaders, gifted generals, and selfless champions. Their titles vary enormously, from Supreme Castellans and Aquila Commanders to Master Guardians, often born in accordance with the specific duties to which they have been assigned. It is Shield Captains that take charge of the Adeptus Custodes military engagements. One is typically afforded overall command of an operation, while several others of his rank may lend him their strength and wisdom in a supporting capacity. The warriors of the Adeptus Custodes are a department of the Adeptus Terra, the imperial government, but its members are answerable only to the Emperor and their own leaders. The Custodes' nerve center and headquarters is the Tower of Hedgemon within the Imperial Palace, while a small elite of 300 Custodes, known as the Companions, form the Emperor's personal bodyguard and never leave his side. Although the Legio Custodes originally numbered 10,000, approximately 5 Terran years into the war within the Wedway, during the Horus Heresy they had been reduced to around only 1,000 custodians due to the incessant warfare against the entities of the warp. However, by the late 41st millennium, the Adeptus Custodes had rebuilt their original strength of 10,000 warriors. From outside, the organization of the 10,000 seems Byzantine. When they deign to account themselves at all to other imperial bodies, their ranks appear complex and highly stratified. Yet much of this is tradition, or else purposeful misdirection. In practice, the Adeptus Custodes use a robust and easily adaptable system to organize their forces. The full details of the organizational structure, disposition, and regulation of the Adeptus Custodes are shrouded in secrecy as befits an institution dedicated to ultimate security. Those outside its ranks, even though they operate close to the Senatorum Imperialis and the highest levels of the Divisio Militaris, cannot hope to know more than a degree of detail which is purely observational and likely barely scratches the surface of the no doubt Byzantine Custodes. What can be outwardly observed is contained here within this account, as are the various details and titles with which the Custodian Guard openly interacts with the other organs of the Imperium's power. The first mystery that outsiders must cope with is that of identity. The Custodian Guard are themselves effectively ageless, and as unchanging as granite, and just as impenetrable to outsiders. They each profess to a given name, often a compound drawn from the lore of ancient Terra's role of kings and tyrants, gods and legends. Whether or not this represents some humor or deliberate irony on the Emperor's part given the Custodian's role is something that it is perhaps unwise to speculate on. Such true names they knew as part of their birth and origin are likely obliterated by the process of their creation, but the myths that have grown up around the Adeptus Custodes have long held that each Custodian Guard garners over his centuries a long list of additional names and titles granted purely by the Emperor for their deeds, history, and character. Such names are held as a secret of their order and never betrayed to others, though some myths would have it that this roll of honor is graven in hidden fashion upon their golden armor, or even etched microscopically into their very bones. It was said that Captain General Constantin Valdor obtained 932 names prior to the assault of Horus upon Terra. In terms of structural organization, it is apparent that the Adeptus Custodes is unique unto itself in terms of form, offering little in common with the rest of the Imperium's agencies of warfare, such as the Astra Militarum or the Adeptus Astartes. This is only fitting as the Adeptus Custodes, like other elements of the so-called Talons of the Emperor, can be more accurately described as a paramilitary rather than a strategic force, neither geared nor equipped towards the fighting or winning of wars, but to its duties of protection and execution. The Adeptus Custodes operate as a military force, a gathering of champions each of whom possesses unassailable authority over virtually any other organization in the Imperium. Conversely, no Imperial agent can give a custodian orders. Even such worthies as the High Lords of Terra and Lord Commander Guilliman are able only to request, not demand, their aid. The Dankanatoi was a chamber of the ancient Legio Custodes that was founded in the final years of the Horus Heresy. Unleashed upon the last dregs of Horus' failed rebellion as they fled Terra, these warriors proved a potent weapon for the battered loyalist host. Indeed, even in the long years of strife that followed the dark age of the Horus Heresy, they remained active, hunting traders and Xenos invaders alike long after the official end of the Great Scouring. Though functionally immortal, even the warriors of the Adeptus Custodes eventually tire. Some suffer physical hurts that impact upon their ability to perform their duties, with lost limbs, artificial eyes, or augmetic organs lessening their physical perfection. Others find their mental faculties beginning to erode, however slightly, acknowledging that their reaction times or mimic awareness are not quite what they once were. For the vast majority of warriors, a tenth of a second reduction in the speed at which blows are stuck or parried might be considered negligible. For a custodian, it is error enough to necessitate that their watch come to an end. When a custodian judges himself no longer fit for duty, he surrenders all of his equipment to a hold of armaments and vanishes into the void of the galaxy clad in hooded black robes. Such noble exiles still serve the Emperor, however, for wherever they travel they observe. Some work alone, dark and ominous figures slipping through the shadows of the Emperor's realm. Others cultivate networks of informants and agents, using fear and intimidation to secure compliance where loyalty and honor will not suffice. Should they bear witness to a situation developing that they believe might threaten Terra or the Emperor, these watchers use secret channels to communicate a warning to the Captain General. So do response forces of the Adeptus Custodes launch punitive and often preemptive strikes throughout the Imperium, forewarned of danger by the eyes of the Emperor.